country between 5 p.m. and 10 p.m., where some areas are shut down from the national grid. Then the national production, according to the president, is 2,300 megawatts, and there's a data center that was supposed to be set up costing, or rather requiring, up to 1,000 megawatts of power, and therefore there is a problem with how that can run given the country's capacity. But now when you look at the data, this is a report from the Kenya Power and Lighting Company of the financial year ending June 2024, says that the installed capacity in the country is 3,243 megawatts. But then there's a difference between installed capacity and the effective interconnected capacity, meaning what is available for distribution, 3,056 megawatts, still higher than the president's number. Then there's something important. The wind and solar contribution to this national capacity is 635 megawatts, which is considered to be intermittent in nature, meaning sometimes may not be reliable. It depends on the amount of wind that is available, the amount of solar, but also how well it is stored. Therefore, if you are to knock off that from the 3,056 megawatts, you remain with some 2,421 megawatts, which could be considered to be stable. But then what is our peak demand? According to the same report by the KPLC, the peak demand was 2,342 megawatts. So peak demand means that when majority of the clients are connected and are using power. That's KPLC in 2024. Let's take a look at what else data is telling us. Now, the latest report from KenGen tells us that the highest peak demand has been recorded, which was on the 24th of October 2025, just a few days ago, and it was 2,411 megawatts, still slightly higher than the stable supply in the country, which is 2,421 megawatts, according to the Kenya KPLC, Kenya Power and Lighting Company. Let's take a look at what KenGen said after that record that was made on that 24th of October, that notably no load shedding was reported across the national grid during the record-breaking demand period, a testament to Kenya's robust system management and investment in renewable capacity spearheaded by KenGen and supported by other sector players. That's according to KenGen on the 20th of October 2025. But then the KPLC in its report cites that there are certain options it has had to look for, bearing in mind the capacity in the country. One of the things is that they do load management is required. That's what the KPLC says. A strategic investment is required. Adequate system support during peak demand hours is also necessary. And then there's something else, sufficient spinning reserve capacity for contingencies. So in a situation where you have some outage, you require some reserve which can be deployed to sustain the national grid at a particular given time. So that's what KPLC says. KenGen says no load shedding was required. KPLC says it may be required. The president says it actually happens. Now, let's take a look at the contribution of each source of energy in the country. For hydro, which has the second highest contribution, the installed capacity is 26% of the national installed capacity. But then installed capacity versus effective capacity, meaning what eventually gets into the national grid, is 26.5%, slightly different. For geothermal, contribution is 29% installed capacity, but what gets into the national grid is slightly lower. Then you look at thermal, 19%, effective is 17.4%. Wind contribution is 13%, eventually gets to 13.9%. Then for solar, 7%. The actual contribution comes to 6.9%. And then there are imports that have been growing over the years, now at 6%. Installed capacity, but then effectively they contribute up to 6.5%. Those are just some of the figures that are necessary in considering that. But then again, the president spoke about an EcoCloud G42 data center project that was signed. An MOU was signed some time early last year. It was supposed, the initial plan was supposed to require 100 megawatts. It is situated at the KenGen Smart Industrial Park in Naivasha, but in future, they hope that it will take up to 1,000 megawatts, meaning it will be so big to require that amount of power. That's what the president was speaking about. But let's just briefly talk about what is the data center for your understanding. We're talking about large-scale tech facility. Of course, it has digital and IT infrastructure for an organization or for a country in this case. And then also there are servers and storage systems for them to manage the flow of that data center itself. What is key here are processes to process the data, to store the data, and eventually to manage the data. And it becomes quite critical, especially at a time that the country and the world is moving towards artificial intelligence and ensuring cloud computing efficiency. And obviously, a data center would require high and stable power supply. That's data point for this week, and we'll be engaging the gang, which is already here shortly. But first, let's hear what the president had to say in regards to this question of power supply and power generation in the country.
We signed an agreement there between G42 of UAE, Microsoft of America, and Kenya to establish data centers. Sindio? Sasa wakati nimerudi nyumbani haya tumeanza data center. Tukaambiwa one data center requires 1000 megawatts. Na tuko na 2003. tuko na 2300 megawatts the whole country. So ili tufanye hiyo data center, we have to shut down half the country. Unaona sasa? So we need to have, if we have to industrialize, if we have to engage in manufacturing, we need minimum 10,000 megawatts of energy.
All right, so that's the president there, of course, saying what he said about the capacity in the country. Of course, a slight difference between the figures he's citing, 2,300 megawatts of national production. That is just about the peak demand that we have in the country. If you look at the installed capacity, it is way higher, over 3,000. But then again, when you have to consider the intermittence of the source and stability of the source, you get to about 2,400, which is more stable. Jay Bonyo, what do you make of this? The president speaking about this in a foreign land and laughing at us.
Well, with us. I think the president was making a business pitch, but the set of data that he was using were not in line with what actually is on ground. So basically, the fact of the matter is, for us to set up data centers and run them effectively, we may need more power than what we currently have. That is a fact. And you've also heard that the government has got these ambitious plans to set up several funds that will be able to finance all these projects. So as he was making his speech, probably he needed a line that would sink, but it was a line that I don't want to say was full of half-truths. But then again, he made a pitch, but with the wrong set of data that ultimately compromises or makes people not believe the entire plan. But what we must agree is that the question of power in this country needs to be addressed. We need to generate more, because the conversation and some of the things he's saying there, that sometimes they have to shut part of the country. Well, I remember a few years back, must have been the Kenya Association of Manufacturers presented an idea that industries needed more power when they were full operational, especially in the evening hours. So they were requesting that if there was a way that those parts of Kenya where they have these industries could be allocated more frequencies for power, so that they're able to do more of their manufacturing in the evenings, then probably that is what the president was alluding to.
And Jamila, you know, in this country, we like to look at our neighbors, even if they're not very close. There's a case of South Africa that have struggled with load shedding for a very long time, despite them having access to even major deposits of fossil fuel. But you have always said that we are not doing load shedding because of how well you're managing our economy. The admission or the claim by the president that we are now doing it, what does it say about our consistency in how we approach issues? But also, what do you make of those developments?
Sam, a few things come to mind. We need to remember that power rationing is a major national economic issue. Why? Because of what it will mean if there's power rationing. I know that people on the far left of this room would not remember, or the far left of this room would not remember the rationing in the 90s.
I can take the mic away.
During the 90s, during President Moi's time, there was power rationing in this country. And what did it do? It impacted hospitals, it impacted manufacturing, it impacted schools, it impacted livelihoods. It even led to job losses, it led to a slowdown of economic growth, it led to business closures. So power rationing is a major, major national economic issue. So a few questions come to mind. Why did the president make such a statement in Doha, Qatar? Because for such a statement to be made, you need maybe a domestic policy update. Maybe you need a technical briefing from the Ministry of Energy, from Kenya Power, from EPRA, and you need to explain a clear mitigation plan. So what are we going to do about it? Because Kenyans reacted very strongly to this announcement because it came out of nowhere. There was no context. There was no reassurance. It just said, we are doing power rationing from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. So the question is there a real electricity shortage in this country? If yes, when did it begin? And why weren't Kenyans told earlier that there was power rationing? And if there is no shortage, was the president briefed incorrectly? So there are a lot of questions about this. So he made that announcement. So what next? There should be follow-up. Give us details, because I don't think there's been any details given about exactly what this means. So this power rationing, where has it been happening? Since when? Who has been affected? So what are we going to do about it? Is it going to spread? Are more areas going to experience it? There are a lot of questions, Sam.
Interesting to say that, because as we have this conversation, there are several parts in the country that have had challenges, perennial challenges with I think they're watching. Perennial challenges with power outages. You'll go to a town and an entire afternoon there's no power. It takes a few days to restore power. Then you hear there has been load shedding. We don't hear clear communication, Linus, about what's what.
Yes, because in Kenya we don't have a very consistent story when it comes to our energy needs. We always lie between great potential and a disaster. In the sense that there is capacity in this country for the production of especially green energy. You know, our geothermal potential is not really fully exploited. That Rift Valley can power this country and beyond. But I think when the president spoke in Qatar, a lot of Kenyans will then be looking for specifics of, yes, you've pointed out at where the problem lies. Now tell us, what do you intend to do about them? Because we have many failed experiments in Kenya when it comes to energy. Among the most recent failed experiments is one that the president is very familiar with, which is the Aror Kimorer dam that was supposed to actually add to the national grid. So internally, we need to have this conversation because, again, we need to see what our unstable energy supply is doing. The cost has always also been a very, very serious concern. I think there was a time here we listed over 10 companies that have left this country because they feel, foreign investors, because they feel that the energy cost in this country is very, very high. Potentially, when you're speaking to Kenyans that are out there in the diaspora, including Qatar, they are now out there looking inside. And some of the questions that they raise out there is the cost of energy back home, not just at consumer level, but also at industrial level. These are some of the things that the president needs to confront. Just a few, was it in September that he was in Ethiopia attending the launch of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam,
right?
Which is a huge project. It's a humbling moment for leadership. I know he was facing this way, but I think when he's talking Qatar, but I think when you stand in Ethiopia before that majestic dam, think as leadership about us back home. What is it that we have failed to do, and why? Because the final point I'll make here is, when it comes to energy generation, an ordinary citizen can do absolutely nothing about it. It is a government assignment. So I think here we've had him. Now he needs to retreat to the inner room with his team and work at answering the questions that he raised in Qatar.
And I think we'll be importing a bit of power from the Ethiopian dam. Oh,
yes.
Your take, Yvonne.
Well, we already are. Look, there is, for me, it's two things. It's when the president seemingly announces that we're in power rationing in a foreign country. Of course, now you understand why there is alarm or concern amongst Kenyans who are wondering, okay, so have we been undergoing some form of rationing, and why is such an important statement being made outside the country at what, like Jay says, was seemingly a pitch to investors and Kenyans living in the diaspora. Like you say, looking for that, there's the diaspora bond, there's the sovereign bond, there's the infrastructure bond, which is what he's looking for, and what the country we know has been pitching for in the future. But I think what is interesting for me, I just want to read some excerpts from the Kenyan statement.
Nice.
This was released on the 28th of October. You alluded a little bit to that in your data point. And it talks about Kenya's appetite for electricity reaching a new peak. There was a peak demand of 2,411 megawatts, which was the highest ever daily consumption. And then it goes on to talk about how that peak demand was met by the several sources of energy we have, both renewable and non-renewable. And then there is paragraph 7 of that says, and I quote, "During this time of high peak, high demand, notably, no load shedding was reported across the national grid during the record-breaking demand period, a testament to Kenya's robust system management and investment in renewable capacity spearheaded by Kenyan and supported by other sector players." It ends quoting Engineer Njenga, who is the DG of Kenyan, says, "This growth in power demand is a strong indicator of Kenya's economic rebound and the success of our long-term investments in sustainable energy generation." This was on the 28th of October. The president was making this statement just a few short days after, when he's saying there is some form of load shedding. But then there is a statement from Kenyan that's saying, at a time when we had our highest peak demand ever,
we didn't need
that there was no load shedding that was required because of the great energy mix that we have, which, by the way, has been touted several times, not just by the president, but the minister, the cabinet secretary as well, of about over 85% of our energy in the country is from renewable energy resources, and that what we do use most of the day is our renewable energy. And then in the evening, when there's a higher demand due to consumers being at home, then they kick in hydro or thermal power. So this is what we've been talking about. For me, it's just that contrast that comes from Kenyan on the 28th of October, and a few short days later, the president is announcing that there is some form of load shedding. So no load shedding required because we're doing really well, but then there is load shedding between the president and Kenyan. Who do we believe, who do we trust? And also, of course, load shedding, like you said, power rationing causes quite a lot of, it's not just an economic issue, it's also a social issue. And when such a statement is made outside the country, of course, there would be some concern.
And of course, there's no discounting the idea that there's necessity of more power generated, because our industries are struggling. They don't have sufficient, and when it's available, it's expensive.
Correct.
A lot of businesses or industries are not starting out because they cannot access affordable power. So there's a real problem there. He says that we need about 10,000 megawatts, and we will need more than 1.5 trillion shillings. So that very big question has to be answered, and unfortunately sometimes,
and here
it has to be answered here.
At home,
Because at the end of the day, like in many instances, public goods have been a problem in this country. Kenyans have had to go for private solutions to public goods. You're talking about education, talking about health, where you have to go find your own private solutions. Now you're talking about this particular question of energy. On transport, you have to go back to your pocket to pay for the expressway. Now we're having toll roads. So consistently, we're getting to more Kenyans having to pay for what is supposed to be provided by the government. Never mind, taxation continues.
And what would be the equivalent for private way of fixing the problem.
Well, I think we'd have to go to, what do you call them, PPAs? PPPs?
Yes.
What is that?
Private partnerships.
Public.
Yes.
Or you're talking about the
power
IPPs.
purchase agreements, and then independent power producers would have to come in.
Right.
There was a suspension. Which year was this?
That must have been in 2020?
Yeah, 2020. There was a suspension. I think there was communication of it being lifted, but we have to wait and see what is happening, because again, there is always a lot of politics of investments, politics of energy, who is getting into it, who is greeting who is meeting who, what is the plan.
And there's also another thing. I mean, I think when we talk about our energy needs, we generate a good amount of energy, but how do we get it from where it's being generated to the last mile, that is to the consumers like you and I? We know of how much is lost by KETRACO from where it's generated, even by those independent power producers who are generating this energy, but it's not up to them to then deliver it and transmit it to the consumers. And there's a big, big question there. And of course, in KETRACO, we know there was a story of Adani, and we know how that went. But then it's enough to generate it here, but how do you get it to
where it needs to go? So hopefully we'll have the data center up and running. Perhaps.
By the way, we do have a data center already in the country.
The plan in Naivasha, so that then you can have accurate data.
Just one more thing. The one data center for which he says he signed an agreement in the US, only to realize after that data center would need more energy than we can provide.
But the clarity of the matter is that the initial plan was that the initial phase would require 100 megawatts.
Which
it is located in the Olkaria geothermal power generation area. So that would be met. But ultimately it will require 1,000 megawatts. That would be a problem, for sure.
You're forgetting some trillions of shillings that were also mentioned somewhere.
1.5?
1.5 trillion.
Tutatafuta. So that's News Gang. We'll be back shortly. And before then, there's a story we need to look at, which is about 10 days since the unexplained disappearance of Shadrach Maritim from his residence. Troubling inconsistencies have emerged. Despite no confirmed sightings, his mobile phone remains active and has been used to transfer funds and engage in online transactions. Meanwhile, critical CCTV footage that initially captured his last known movements has mysteriously vanished, and Ode Francis has been on this story.
Shadrach Maritim was officially reported missing on the 27th of October. His phone has, however, been active. CCTV recording showing Maritim stepping onto the road for what appeared to be a routine jog has disappeared. Detectives failed to secure this footage until nearly 4 days after his disappearance, raising concerns about procedural lapses. Evidence obtained by the investigations team revealed that Maritim's phone remained operational after he disappeared. On the evening of the 28th at 7:24 p.m., hours after he was last seen, his device transferred 10,000 shillings to Felix Kimutai Magut. Further transactions followed. At 4:49 a.m., 3,500 shillings was sent to the same recipient. On the morning of the 29th, the phone was used to purchase mobile data. Later that evening, at 5 p.m., another transaction of 15,000 shillings was made to Magut. On the night preceding his disappearance, Maritim was reportedly with his partner, Mercy Chebiche. She expressed frustrations over the sluggish response from investigators, noting that their phones were not confiscated until days later, despite being with Maritim during his final known hours. Mercy suspects that Maritim's personal guard and assistant may possess crucial information about his whereabouts. She questions their lack of urgency and why they failed to accompany him on the day he disappeared.
For me today niseme nimedisappear. Of course, watatafuta yule rafiki yangu Saidi wa karibu, wajue ya kwamba Weisi ya Masi anapitianga wapi, anafanyanga nini. Yeah. But today ndio wamechukua hizo simu for more investigations, which is it's too late. This is the 7th day missing person. It's too late for them to collect.
Chief Investigator Daniel Mulele of Uasin Gishu County admitted that no substantial leads have surfaced regarding Maritim's location.
We are doing physical search. We have also submitted these phones to cyber crime for exploitations. perhaps there could be any information that could lead us to exactly what happened.
In 2022, Maritim was abducted and later found in Bungoma County. Ode Francis, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
Now, the Jipange na Viusasa caravan entered its second day in the western region to the excitement